danke, Stefan. Guten Morgen. I'm so excited to be here. I flew in from New Zealand yesterday morning, and I love traveling to other countries. I learned a new word today in German. I don't speak any German. I learned a new word today in German. The word that I learned, 3 words really, zu mitnehmen. Very important, takeaway. If you're ordering food, you want it to stay or to take away. Now I know how to say take away. I can add this to my existing German, which is like ein, zwei, drei, and das ist nicht mein Gepäck, which is that is not my luggage. Very important things to know. I think it's critical when you go to another country to understand the cultures and customs of that country. I had a professor at university who told us a story once. She went to Japan and she was running a workshop in Japan. And she decided to start her workshop with a joke. And if you go to a place where you have to have an interpreter, I'm very lucky that I get to present this in English today, but she had to work with an interpreter. And there are 2 kinds of interpretation that you can get. There's simultaneous, where as you speak, the interpreter is speaking. And then there's ping pong translation, which is you speak for a while and then you pause, and then the interpreter speaks for a while. So she had an interpreter that was doing ping pong translation, and she decided to start her workshop with a joke. And she told her joke, and I mean, always risky, right? Like, don't go to another country and start with a joke. It's a dangerous move. But she decided she was just going to go for it, and so she told her joke, and the joke took quite a while for her to tell, and she finished the joke, and she turned to the interpreter, and the interpreter spoke for all of 3 seconds, and the whole room busted up laughing. And she says, "What did you tell them?" And he said, "I told them, Professor Berger has told a joke. Please laugh." So I would like to start, instead of starting with a joke, I would like to start with a story. And the story is, it really begins 10 years ago with a woman called Lara Stein, who is here, I know. Where are you, Lara? Hand up. Where is she? Yeah, Lara Stein. Can we get a round of applause for Lara Stein? Lara, you may be applauding without knowing why, and I thank you for your trust in me. Lara, we call her the mother of us all. She founded the entire TEDx program at TED, but she left TED and went on to join an organization called Singularity University and lead their global expansion. And I've been involved with Lara since the early days of the TEDx movement. And when she joined Singularity University, she invited me to come along to their executive program. It's a 6-day program at their headquarters at the NASA Ames Research Center in Mountain View in Silicon Valley. And I'll tell you what, because I've been running TEDx events for so long, my job as a TEDx curator is to be across new innovations, right? It's to pay attention to what is up and coming so that I can showcase it on my stage. And so when I went to Singularity University, I thought, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I didn't expect it to completely upend my understanding of the nature of technological advancement, and to also transform my entire appreciation for the impact that this has on every aspect of our world, not just on our economy, but also on our government, our education system, our healthcare system. Everything about the way that we live and work gets impacted by exponential technological development, and not enough of us understand this in order to be able to take intentional action in response. And so I came away kind of feeling like I'd swallowed the red pill and washed it down with Kool-Aid. And I was on a mission. I was like, I need to help everybody understand what I've learned. And so I ended up bringing Singularity University to New Zealand and to Australia. This was the Singularity U New Zealand Summit. We had 1,400 people along for that. I spent 4 years talking to people about exponential tech. And really what I want to do is boil down everything that I learned about that topic into 3 core insights. And the first one starts with this guy. So this is Gordon Moore. He's one of the co-founders of Intel Corporation. And in 1965, he made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling every 18 months as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we can see. This became known as Moore's Law. You've probably heard of it. So the first insight comes from Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the co-founders of Singularity University. And what Kurzweil said was, hang on a minute, what if that doubling phenomenon is not actually about the transistors at all? So fun fact you may not know about Moore's Law. Gordon Moore made his famous prediction based on a data set of 4. He had 4 data points. But Kurzweil zoomed out on it. He said, what if instead of looking at the number of transistors we can fit on an integrated circuit, we look instead at what we might call the price performance of computing? How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000? Turns out that number has been doubling for almost 120 years. starting way back with the beginning of computing, with electromechanical punch cards, moving on to relays, and then vacuum tubes, and then transistors, and only then integrated circuits. Moore's law is actually the 5th iteration of this underlying doubling paradigm, not the first. Kurzweil called it the law of accelerating returns. So why is that so important? What is so interesting about a doubling curve? Well, it turns out they have a few characteristics that actually make them kind of imperative to pay attention to. And the first one is that they look flat for a really long time. And you'll know this if you ever tried to do that trick where you fold a piece of paper in half 8 times. Anybody ever try that trick? First fold is easy, second fold is easy, third fold is easy. Easy is easy. You're like, this trick is so dumb. Why am I even doing it? And it's not until you hit that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper that things start to get a little crazy. The second characteristic is that our brains are totally not wired for this stuff. We evolved on the savannah chasing prey and running from predators that behaved in a predictable, linear fashion. We evolved to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to that end of the room, not to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to the moon. And so as a result, the experts continue to predict linear, no matter how much evidence we have to the contrary. Gordon Moore himself twice said that Moore's law was over. Both times proven wrong. Like the guy who invented the law, he can't get his own law right. So I don't know what hope the rest of us have. But the difference between something following a linear trajectory and something following a doubling curve is insane. 30 linear steps, and we're back out at the catering. 30 doubling steps, and we're 26 times around the planet. And the tricky thing there is that we're not halfway until the 29th step, so it's really hard to measure progress as you go. I don't think there's a single person in this room, myself included, who could correctly guess where we would be at step 15 of this process. Our brains do not work this way. And so when we see doubling curves in action, we have to be systematic and disciplined in our assessment and our analysis of them if we want to have a hope of being able to respond effectively. I'm going to tell you a story to highlight just how hard it is to get your head around this stuff. This story is almost certainly apocryphal. Don't let that bother you. Never let the facts get in the way of a good story. This is a story about the inventor of chess. The inventor of chess. He comes up with the game of chess. He goes to the king. He says, "Sire, I have invented this game and I wish to gift it to the kingdom for the good of all our citizens." And the king says, "This is a wonderful thing indeed that you have wrought. I wish to reward you. How would you like to be compensated?" And the inventor says, "I am but a humble man, sire. I ask for not much, merely a single grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard, and 2 on the second, and 4 on the third, and 8 on the fourth, until such time that the board should be full." And the king says to himself, "This man is very clever with games, but he knows not how to value himself," and he readily agrees to the inventor's request. We can guess where this is going. By the time the chessboard's full, the king would have owed the inventor 18 quintillion grains of wheat. But all those grains of wheat together, it comes out to something like 1.2 trillion metric tons. To put that in context, the entire global output of wheat for all of 2017 was 753 million metric tons. So it's like 1,600 times the entire global output of wheat for all of 2017. If you lay those grains of wheat end to end, they would reach Alpha Centauri and back. And the thing that I want to drive home here is how hard it is to get your head around the progress. So I want you to think about where you think we would be when we are halfway through. We've got 64 squares on a chessboard. Where you think we would be when we're at square 32 of the chessboard. So we're going to play a little game. 64 squares on a chessboard. We get to the end. We know we're at 1.2 trillion metric tons. And what I want you to do is I want everyone to put your hand up. Put your hand up, and I want you to keep it up. Come on. Put your hand up. Okay, so what I want you to do is keep your hand up. And I'm going to ask you to keep your hand up until you think I have gone below the halfway mark, below where we will be at the 32nd square. So at 64 squares, we are at 1.2 trillion metric tons. Who thinks we will be at 600 billion metric tons? Nobody. Good. I'm glad you're paying attention. Okay. How about we're going to reduce it? We're going to reduce by big numbers because it's hard to, let's say it's 600 million metric tons. We're going to reduce by 1,000-fold. Who thinks we will be at 600 million metric tons? Who thinks we will be at 100 million metric tons? Is that lower? 50 million metric tons, 10 million metric tons, 1 million metric tons, 500,000 metric tons, 100,000 metric tons, 50,000 metric tons, 25,000 metric tons, 10,000 metric tons, 5,000 metric tons, 1,000 metric tons, 500 metric tons. Awesome. The correct answer is 279. 279. It is so hard to get your head around this stuff. And unless we are systematic and disciplined in our assessment and our analysis of them, we will always be left saying it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. I want to show you what this looks like in real life. So you might have seen this story from March of 2016. DeepMind, which is now owned by Google, they came out with an artificially intelligent Go player. It's called AlphaGo. AlphaGo in March of 2016 beat Lee Sedol, the world champion at the game of Go. This was a phenomenal accomplishment. It happened fully a decade before the researchers expected it to. The game of Go is one of the most complex games that we have created. The number of possible moves in Go, many orders of magnitude greater than the number of atoms in the universe. This was an incredible, incredible feat. A year later, DeepMind came out with a new artificially intelligent Go player. It's called AlphaGo Zero. So the original AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol 4 games to 1. AlphaGo Zero beat AlphaGo 100 games to 0, which already is amazing. But even more amazing is how they trained it. So typically with an AI, you want to train it to do something, you feed it lots of data. Let's say you want to train your AI to recognize pictures of cats. You feed it millions of pictures of cats and millions of pictures of not cats, and you tell it, these are cats and these are not cats, and it starts to process all that data and parse all of those images and extrapolate patterns. And so it'll say something like, okay, so, pictures of cats. Well, the cats have 2 pointy ears, but maybe one of them's been chewed off. So they also have eyes that look like this and, whiskers and mouth like this, but maybe it's just me holding a cat mask. So they also look for the body like this and a tail, so it's able to parse all this. And then ultimately you can feed it a new picture and it can look at that new picture and it can say, yep, cat, or nope, not cat. That's a gross oversimplification, but broadly speaking, that's how it works. And when they created the original AlphaGo, that is exactly what they did. They fed it 40 million historic games of Go. It was able to ingest all of that data, parse all of that information, start to extrapolate patterns, and at any given moment, figure out what is the next best move for me to make. But with AlphaGo Zero, they didn't feed it a single game. They gave it the rules, and they gave it the desired outcome. And they let it play itself, starting with random play. Literally any move will do. It played itself 4.9 million times, and within 3 days was the best Go player in the world. When we hit that inflection point, that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper, we go from nothing into everything seemingly overnight, and I don't want anyone left saying it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. Right, so insight number 1, it's not just about transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2 is that it's not just about computing. This doubling phenomenon applies to any technology once it becomes what we call information enabled. Think about something like photography. Photography used to be substrate enabled. It was dependent on the physical film for you to do the thing. And then it became information enabled, dependent instead on ones and zeros. And once that happened, it started to follow a doubling curve, much like computing. The first digital camera had a resolution of 0.01 megapixel. My phone has a camera with 40 megapixels of resolution. Again, nothing into everything seemingly overnight. So some of the technologies that have become information enabled now starting to follow doubling curves, gene sequencing. So there are a lot of different ways to show a price performance chart. They all look slightly different. They're all showing the same thing. How much performance can you get for a fixed price, or how much is price coming down for a fixed level of performance? So this is the cost of gene sequencing. This is the latter. How much is price coming down to sequence a human genome? On the y-axis, we've got the price. Just a quick note, that y-axis is on a log scale, meaning it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes 1, 1,000, 100,000, a million. 10,000, 100,000, a million. A straight line on a log scale is exponential. Hopefully you follow that. So that straight line on the top, that's Moore's law. And when we first sequenced the human genome, the first genome cost us $2.7 billion to sequence. And then the price came down for a long time, really consistently with Moore's law. And then in 2007, we introduced some next generation gene sequencing techniques and the price started to plummet. And now we are looking at sequencing a genome. At retail, you can get it for $500, $600. My friend and colleague, Raymond McCauley, who's on the Boma Global Brain Trust, he's our digital biology track chair. He anticipates a future when it will be cheaper for you to flush your toilet than it is for you to sequence your genome. The cost of the water to flush your toilet will be more expensive than the cost of sequencing your genome. What else is coming down exponentially? This is one of my favorite charts of all time. This chart is called Welcome to the Terror Dome. This is not a terror chart for me. This is a happy chart for me. It's a terror chart for the people who created it. That's the good folks at the CIA, the World Bank, and the Energy Information Administration. So what we're looking at here is the price performance of energy by different fuel types. And we've got 5 different kinds of fuel types. On the y-axis, again, we've got the price per million BTUs. This is not a log scale. This is a linear scale. On the x-axis, we've got the years. So we started in 1949 and come along since then. We're mapping 5 different fuel types, and 4 of those fuel types start in 1949. And what do? They bump along the bottom. They bump along, they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. Over time, they gradually trend upwards. Those are our fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are linear technologies, and this is what linear technologies do in terms of price performance. They go up and down, and over time, they gradually trend upwards. And then what happens? Doesn't even come onto the chart until like 2007. And when it comes onto the chart, it's so expensive that all the incumbents are like, it's never going to be a thing. We never need to worry about it. And then the price plummets. That's solar. Solar is information-enabled energy. It is doubling in price performance much faster than Moore's Law. In 2017, for the first time ever, it became cheaper in certain parts of the world to build and operate a new solar plant than it was to maintain an existing coal plant. Think about that for a second. Cheaper to build and operate new than maintain existing. All of the sunk cost arguments go completely out the window, and all of a sudden the right thing to do for the planet aligns with the right thing to do for your bottom line, and that is when we see transformative tipping point change. And if you don't believe me that we are fully at a tipping point when it comes to solar, you only need to look at one of my favorite headlines of all time, which is this, that the Kentucky Coal Museum has switched to solar. Right. Insight number 1, it's not just about the transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2, it's not just about computing, it's about any information-enabled technology. And insight number 3 is that these technologies are now starting to converge. So now we have to consider what happens when an exponential progression in something like artificial intelligence converges with an exponential progression in robotics. And we get super intelligent robots. What happens when an exponential progression in biotechnology or bioengineering converges with an exponential progression in 3D printing at the molecular level, when we can literally print matter molecule by molecule? And of course, what happens is that everything accelerates even faster. So how should we feel about all this? We're going to do a poll. It's not a Slido poll. This is the most low-tech poll you can imagine. This is a hands-up poll. So hands up if you hear about this, the nature of exponential technological progression, and you feel like this. Show of hands. Show of hands if you hear about technology makes you feel like this. Show of hands if you feel like technology makes you feel like this. Okay? Show of hands if you didn't show your hand. Okay, we're going to go back. We're going to do this again. You have to put your hand up for at least one. You are allowed to choose both. So show of hands if you feel like this. Show of hands if you feel like this. Show of hands if you feel like both. Okay, everyone is right. William F. Buckley said, the mark of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold 2 opposing thoughts simultaneously and still retain the ability to function. And to show you how right you are, I want to show you this headline came out in April of this year. The world is sadder and angrier than ever, new study finds. You should feel terrible. The sad face is the right answer. And then you read through the article and you get into the depths, and on paragraph 12, it says, actually, while we had record levels of negativity in this report, we also had record levels of positivity. So simultaneously, we've got record levels of people feeling terrible and record levels of feeling awesome. And what I find super interesting is that the feeling terrible is the bit they chose to lead with, not the feeling awesome. So let's talk about the feeling terrible, since that's our first inclination typically. I'm going to talk to you about a few things that keep me up at night. One of the first ones is increased inequality. We used to talk a lot about the future of work and technological unemployment. I can tell you technological unemployment is one of those things I will happily stay up with you until 2 a.m. debating about over whiskey. There are as many papers saying tech is going to get rid of all the jobs as there are papers saying tech is going to create all the new jobs. What I can tell you is that as of right now today, we are not seeing an increase in unemployment as a direct result of automation, but we are, as of right now today, seeing an increase in inequality as a direct result of automation. In March of last year, the Brookings Institute came out with a study that showed this. This was reinforced just this month with a study that came out from MIT showing that as we increase our levels of automation, wealth tends to concentrate towards the holders of capital and away from labor. And we've been seeing this phenomenon since the mid-70s when we first decoupled productivity from wage growth, productivity growth from wage growth. And the thing that scares me about this is that if I were a politician, I could get up here and say, everything is awesome. Unemployment's low, productivity's high, GDP is up, things are going great. And yet, I think we have ample evidence surrounding us that for millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people around the world, everything is very much not awesome. And so when we have the disconnect between the top line narrative, the things that we're measuring against, and the lived experience for millions and billions of people, that's when we start to see some of the political unrest that we're seeing now. This says 3, but it actually is 2, of course. So the first thing that keeps me up is increased inequality. The second thing that keeps me up is increased cyber risk. When everything is connected, everything is vulnerable, and everything is connected now. Our light bulbs are connected, our fridges are connected, our TVs are connected. My friend David Roberts has a cup that's connected to the internet. It's a cup. Like, the cup is like the most low-tech object that we have. We've had cups since we were like living in caves, and for some reason, David's cup has to be able to talk to other cups on the internet. Everything is connected. Last year, there was a hack at a casino in Las Vegas. They got hacked into a high roller database. They got in through a connected fish tank in the lobby. Like, why do your fish need to be on the internet? Everything is connected, and when everything is connected, everything is vulnerable. And our response is almost wholly inadequate. Last year, there was a worm got distributed through the U.S., a Russian worm. It infected 500,000 routers, and apparently the worm allowed the hackers to read all of the data that was coming through those routers and could, in fact, turn those routers off and on at will. And the U.S. FBI's official response to this was, have you tried turning it off and on again? No joke. They put out a public advisory saying, please reboot your routers. I don't know if any of you have ever worked on help desk, but restart your router is not going to cut it. And then the third thing that keeps me up at night, this is just to keep you on your toes. The second one said 3, the third one says 5. The third thing that keeps me up at night is the undermining of trust in our civil society. So if you know what this is from, you won't want to admit it. This is an image from a video showing the face of Wonder Woman Gal Gadot superimposed onto the body of a porn star. The video was made purporting to show her having sex with her stepbrother. It was uploaded onto a website called Step Siblings Caught. It was made using a technology called deepfakes, which allows you to superimpose anyone's face on anyone else's body. And this technology can be awesome. You can use it to make yourself look like you're dancing like Bruno Mars. So you take a source video and you apply yourself to the source video. But obviously, as the Gal Gadot video shows, it can also be used for malicious purposes. Combine this with technology we now have that allows you to use your face to control someone else's face in a video. So these guys have worked out a way to use a commodity webcam off the shelf, like no special equipment, so that they can use their face to control the face of Donald Trump in the video. We also have technology now that allows you to generate convincing audio in anyone's voice, and that creates situations like this one. Can we roll the video, please?
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. Stay woke, bitches.
I love Jordan Peele because he makes it funny, but it's actually quite scary. How can we move forward on any kind of major global initiative if we don't even have the ability to have a shared understanding of the facts? So these are the things that keep me up at night. But remember F. Scott Fitzgerald, the mark of a first-rate mind. By many metrics, 2018 was the best year ever in human history. In 2018, the smallest share of our population ever was hungry, impoverished, or illiterate. In 2018, every single day, 295,000 people gained access to electricity. Every single day in 2018, 305,000 people gained access to clean drinking water. And every single day in 2018, 620,000 people got access to the internet. It turns out, one of the things that has been keeping me up at night is algorithmic bias, the fact that almost everything that we do nowadays is controlled by algorithms that are increasingly opaque and that reflect our historic biases and injustices. But turns out that actually algorithms are far less biased than the humans who create them. And we're also in a world now where we have ultrasound technology available for under $100 that is powered by your smartphone. I did some work a year ago with the Ministry of Health in New Zealand, and they brought in stakeholders from all across the health sector. And one of them was a woman who runs the Midwives Association for New Zealand. And I talked to her at the end of the day, and she said, "You know what, I'll tell you what, when you first started talking, I didn't want to know anything you had to say." She said, "My job is to walk alongside these women as they're going through their journey and to be an advocate for them and to be a partner and an ally for them. And when you start talking about exponential technology, all I hear is you're going to put something in between me and the women that I'm there to serve." She says, "And now what you're telling me is I can go out to rural New Zealand or rural Germany or rural Australia or rural America, and I can meet with a woman and I can tell her she needs an ultrasound. And instead of her having to call and make that appointment a week away and having to drive 5, 6, 10, 12 hours to get that appointment, having to find childcare, having to find the money for the petrol, having to wait then another week to get the results, you're telling me that I can sit with a woman and say, you need an ultrasound, give her the ultrasound, get the results instantly via AI, and then talk her through the implications and the next steps and where she needs to be." That is a game changer. It's a total game changer. So one of the other things that came readily apparent to me as I've been doing this work for the past 4 or 5 years is that, with Singularity University, we talked almost exclusively about the nature of technological progression. But if you look around, it becomes totally clear that it's not just technology that is changing at an ever-increasing pace. We're also witnessing unprecedented changes in terms of our economics, starting with Thomas Piketty's book, Capital, but now seeing reports from all sorts of people suggesting the ways in which capitalism in its current form is no longer serving the purpose that it was designed for, including Ray Dalio, who runs a $1 trillion hedge fund. We're seeing massive political change, both an increase on the side of globalization, nationalization, and popularism, as well as an increase on the side of the more left-leaning politicians. This is the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from the US. Both of these phenomena, I would argue, are indicative of the same underlying cause, which is the idea that the system is not working for me. We're seeing, obviously, the impacts of climate change starting to make themselves ever more felt, whether it's fires in the Amazon or the increasing strength of hurricanes. This is Abaco Island in the Bahamas that was recently devastated from Hurricane Dorian. And one of the things that comes through totally clearly to me is that these vectors of change all have one thing in common, which is that they are not about the technology or the system or the process. They are about us as humans and who we are and who we want to be. So the purpose of Boma is for us to be more intentional and intelligent about the future we're creating. Because right now what we're doing is sitting back and anticipating that there is some future that is fixed and static and out there waiting to happen to us, as opposed to something that is created by us, by the aggregation of the choices we make every single day. So what does the future need from you? I'm going to argue 2 things. The first one is first principles and clarity of purpose. And the kind of question that we need to be asking ourselves is a question like, what is the purpose of the corporation? So most people on the street, if you ask them what is the purpose of the corporation, most people understand that the purpose of the corporation is to return profits to shareholders. And most people believe, in fact, that that's the law. But it's not the law. It's an idea. It's an idea that was first put forward by this guy. It's Milton Friedman. He wrote it in an op-ed in the New York Times in 1970, saying that the best way for a corporation to fulfill its purpose to society is by focusing exclusively on returning profits to shareholders. That is an idea whose time, I would argue, is up. And Stefan mentioned this in his opening comments. You know, nearly 200 chief executives agree with me, along with Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock, who at the beginning of last year wrote a letter to all of the CEOs of all of his investee companies. BlackRock is the largest fund in the world. They have $7 trillion under management. Wrote a letter to all of the chief executives of his investee companies saying, unless you have a plan for not only how you're going to look after shareholders, but also employees, suppliers, your community, and the world at large, then we are going to divest our funds from you. So the first thing we need is clarity of purpose and that ability to ask those questions from first principles. Why are we here? What is the point of what we're trying to do? And what is the overarching thing we need to be focused on? But the second thing that we need is courage. So often when it comes to technology, the question that we ask is, can we? Can we automate this? Can we have robots do that? Can we, land on an asteroid and start mining it? Can we? And I would suggest that in an age of exponential technology, the answer to that question is almost always yes. It's either yes or soon. Those are the only two options, right? Yes or soon. Yes, we can. Yes, we can automate that. Yes, we can get a robot to do that. Yes, we can land on an asteroid and mine it. Yes, we can. It's the wrong question. The question we should be asking is not can we, but should we? And in order to ask that question, we need to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations. In order to ask questions about our impact on humanity, our impact on the planet, our impact on on society, our impact on our staff, we have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations and face uncomfortable truths. But that is, I think, the most essential characteristic of leaders in an exponential world, that ability to have that courage to have those uncomfortable conversations, because I will tell you what, disruption takes courage, innovation takes courage, change takes courage, creativity takes courage, inclusivity takes courage, and most of all, ethics take courage. We need to be courageous in order to create the future that we want. I don't know how closely you follow American politics, but we've had a huge issue in the US for years about gun control and gun violence. The worst rates of gun violence in the developed world. And just last week, we can't solve this problem politically. The politicians have not been able to get any kind of progress on this. Just last week, the chief executive of Walmart decided that they were going to stop selling assault-style guns. This is a chief executive of a major corporation with obligations to its shareholders saying they're going to eliminate a profitable product line because he has the courage to believe that this is not what is good for humanity. This is not the future that he wants to create. Last week also, Jeff Bezos came out with a plan to tackle climate change. They're looking at becoming climate neutral a decade before they would be required to under the Paris Accord. Again, courage in action. And we can take courage within the realms that we have responsibility for. We cannot wait. We cannot wait for politicians to have courage. We can't wait for our competitors to have courage. We can't wait for other people to have courage. We have to start with ourselves. And I'm going to close with two final questions that I believe are the two most important questions we can be asking at any point in time. And the first question is, what is the future that we want to create? And the second, potentially more important question is, who do we need to be to create that future? Thank you.
Thank you, Kaila. Great kickoff and great questions. I don't know how it is with you, but I have a lot of things in my mind now starting, and I think we will use the course of the day and also this evening to discuss and maybe discuss the questions. So, I just thought about where can we start? What do you think? From your perspective, what is a good start? I mean, we have different jobs. Anybody would say, but me, I can't, right?
Yeah.
She's so right, but I only work there.
Yeah.
I'm a small entrepreneur, whatever. What do you think? What do you tell these people where to start?
Yeah. So the first thing I would think, I love the way you framed that question, because for me, the first place to start is with understanding our own agency. Understanding the power that each one of us has to influence change in the work that we do every single day. And we often talk about this in terms of leadership, that leadership for me is not about the title that you hold. Brene Brown uses a definition of leadership that is anyone who sees the potential in people and processes and who is willing to take action to bring about that potential. That's a great definition. I would argue it goes further than that. I think we demonstrate leadership with every action and every choice that we make every single day. So the way that you choose to engage with a waiter in a restaurant will demonstrate leadership to the people who are at your table and to that waiter. The way that you choose to interact with not only the people who report to you, but the people who are your colleagues, the people who are above you in the organization, that is an act of leadership. And with every one of those choices, you can choose what kind of example that you want to set, what behavior you think is okay and not okay. So the first step is to understand our agency. And then once we understand our agency and understand the power that we hold as leaders, because every single person in this room is a leader, once we understand the power we hold as leaders, our next step is to use that power for good. So to use that power in whatever our realm is, and I know, we were talking last night about Greta, but, I'll tell you what, if a 16-year-old school kid can step up, and the thing with power and the thing with leadership is that nobody gives it to you. It only comes because you decide to take the act of leading. It is an intentional act that comes from within you. Nobody is out there who's going to go, hey, guess what? You get to be leader now. No, you have to step up and take that. And so the first step is understanding that is within your power. And then the second step is using that power to effect positive change.
That's good. That's a good start. It's a good kickoff for the day, right? Thank you, Kaila.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And